welcome to Tech Time Today. This is another episode in our series on Lean Canvas. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the solution, which in many ways is my favorite part of Lean Canvas to talk about, because if you're like me, you're a software developer, you like building, the solution is all about building. But oddly enough, the biggest part of this is to actually avoid building something initially when you're talking about the solution, which may seem contradictory, but I'll get into it. This is the Lean Canvas. In previous episodes of Tech Time Today, I've gotten into what Lean Canvas is in general. I've talked about the problem on the way left-hand side, how important it is to find a good quote unquote problem to solve. And then we talked about customer segments in the last episode, finding the specific characteristics of the customer that has your problem and the one that you're trying to build a solution for. So today we're going to talk about the solution. One of the things we discussed in the last episode for customer segments was using something like userinterviews.com to assess how severe does a particular set of customers experience the problem we're trying to solve. And like I mentioned then, you're ideally trying to get to a place where your targeted customer segment experiences that problem with a severity of like 8, 9, 10 out of 10. And you have to do a similar thing for the solution. So with everything you're doing to try to iterate through a solution, it should be in getting feedback from users. So the thing you don't want to do, is to say, okay, I know the problem we're trying to solve. I know the customers, or I think the customers that have this problem. All right, now let me just build something. People talk about an MVP. They want to build their MVP. And the thing is, though, you really don't want to do that. You want to actually validate the idea of what you're trying to build as a solution before you actually build something, because building something takes time and it's expensive. And a lot of times you don't build the right thing. And as much as you say, oh, I'm going to build something quick or whatever, it's never quick. You're always building extra stuff on top of it. It's always stuff in your own head that you're trying to solve, and you're not actually solving stuff for other people. And so what is the way in which you actually validate something that doesn't exist? In my mind, there's 4 levels here, okay? So level 1 is really simply just the idea. There's literally nothing. There's nothing for the user to look at. There is nothing for them to actually use in a real sense. It's just the idea of the solution. And this is clearly something that is easy in some sense to do, because you just have to think about it and describe it. And so the very first level is just like I did user interviews for validate the problem. I would do a series of user interviews to validate the solution by just talking to people about it. So at this point that you have a set of customers who experience the problem greatly, and you have a couple of rounds of user interviews where you're just like, okay, I'm just going to riff with them about like, here's what I'm thinking for a solution. And a lot of times in this sort of open-ended space, it's helpful, but it can go in a lot of different directions, because you'll get a lot of different ideas. You want to be careful. Like it isn't in this stage, this early stage, you are trying to see some common patterns. You're trying to work towards getting a more solid idea of this sort of specifics. What is it, the key things that help drive that this person who has this problem would be super interested in this solution? And sometimes it's a specific feature. Sometimes it's just an idea. It's just like, I just want to feel safer or something like that. It's more abstract. Whatever it is, you kind of work us on just those ideas. So that's the first level, just purely the idea, nothing written down. The second level is a good, well-designed landing page. Other product people will have different ideas of their process for trying to validate the solution. This is my own personal preference, that after I have the general idea, like abstract ideas, I really like to invest a little bit of time in having a well-designed landing page. And so this is an example of one product that I worked on that we ended up shutting down. So it ultimately was not a success, but I would say that this landing page that we worked on for a while did work, from the sense that, for our customers, when they looked through this, it helped tremendously to elicit so much good feedback and understanding. And so this seems pretty simple, like a simple, beginning of a landing page, the above the fold here. But there's actually quite a bit going on when you really, really break it down. And there was a ton of iterations to get to this point. So it didn't start off right from the bat from this. I forgot even, I guess it would have been interesting if I had kept all the different variations. I'll have to do that for the next time I go through this process. But this is sort of the end result of, 20 plus different iterations. And I won't go through everything here, but just to give you a couple things when you're kind of looking through this page of stuff that came from the user interviews, came from getting the feedback that we wouldn't have known before. Initially, the product wasn't actually crawling and getting data from all these other sites. We were actually, I think at one point going to be like, oh, we will just pull from Amazon. But then we started to understand, these people will typically, people who are searching for the best product will open up their browser to all these different sites themselves and do comparisons. So they're sort of manually doing these comparisons at these different sites. But if we put a lot of the sites that they were using to do the comparisons there, then they're like, oh, I don't have to do that work anymore. That's where this is not only a marketing thing, but it also made us realize that, it was going to be important that we built a web scraper that actually was able to pull from all these different sites. And then the screenshots, at the time that we were doing this, the app didn't actually have any of this. This was purely conceptual, but it allows the user to envision exactly what the app does, comparing different products, trying to aggregate what people like and dislike, aggregate all of the reviews from on the right-hand side. For the overall owner score, we're sort of aggregating all of the review scores from multiple different sites. This helped with the marketing sense of getting the idea across, but also made us realize of what we had to do to build the product in order to meet the criteria of our target customers. And then the third stage for the solution, which sometimes I skip over, to be honest, is for certain things, whether there's a way of manually, without building something, manually providing the service in something that just doesn't scale, but allows you to get validation. One example for the Critically site where we're doing product comparisons, it doesn't scale at all, but that we tried out initially was to say, okay, tell us what product is you're looking for. So let's say sneakers. Like, I'm trying to find sneakers. This is my criteria. Okay, find me the best. Now, the product, we would want to do this comparison from all the different websites out there, this sort of aggregation of data of reviews from every website out there. And that would be the ideal, but that takes a lot of time to build. So instead, what we tried to do in a one-off base, again, to validate the product, is we had users just send to us what they wanted. And then we literally manually did what they normally do. So like I had, for example, I got from a user, yes, sneakers, I'm size 9, I have wide feet. This is my criteria. Okay. All right. Then I opened up 10 different tabs manually. I looked through Wirecutter. I looked through Amazon reviews. I looked through all the different reviews myself. And then I sent a manual report back to them, like in the format that we were testing out or whatever, and said, okay, this is what I found. This is the actual comparison. This is the aggregation of scores, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think of this? Is this helpful? Now, it took me like an hour or something like that to manually do that work, in really serious depth. But you get like great feedback then you see, first of all, you've manually done the work that they're trying to automate, and you get a better feel for that. And then the user is able to give you feedback off of that work to whether it sort of satisfied and fixed the problem. And then you can kind of start to build off of that. Okay, so that's step 3, is the manual part of doing things. And then step 4 is the MVP. And as many people have said before, the key thing with the MVP is just really focusing in on the core feature. I mean, that's by far the toughest thing, because you're so tempted to build all these different things that you've learned about over the years. But if you can identify that core thing and identify a way of building something quick, in the ideal case, from the moment that you've validated your level 3 kind of like manual solution to when you have an actual working developer product, I mean, if it's more than a month, let's say, you definitely are doing something wrong. Like, I don't care how complicated it is. Like, you need to figure out a way to simplify your initial actual product, that it can be done within that shorter time frame. Like that's it's just a good litmus test, because otherwise, almost certainly, you're building stuff that are not necessarily needed. Like, you need to get that automated version out. Like, you can cut corners. Like, think about the ways you can cut corners, and think about when you were doing all those other 3 levels of validation of the solution, what were the things that the user actually cared about? Like, do they care that they need to have this amazing registration process, like for registering new users? No. Do they, have to have some, amazing way of updating their profile picture? Like, no. Like, you can cut all that stuff out. Like, it doesn't have to have all that type of polish. It just has to do the core thing that you have already validated does work. And when you get that, then you can start to get like a bunch of other feedback and then iterate from there. So hopefully that helped give you a couple good ideas for the solution part of the Lean Canvas. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next time on Tech Time Today.